Hey folks, welcome back. So today we're going to look at the new reprints of the Star Wars RPG Beginner games. These used to be published by Fantasy Flight Games, or FFG for short, until their RPG division was farmed out to Edge Studio after the takeover of FFG by Asmodee. Now that was problematic in various terms, mainly because the game had been out for some time, the RPG, more than 10 years by now. A lot of stuff was out of print and hard to find, but they did promise to bring it back into print, which has been happening very slowly. There was a recent reprint run of the core books and a few basic supplements for the 3 different game lines. As you can see here, we have the Edge of the Empire game line, which has its own core book, which is about living on the fringes of the Star Wars universe in the Outer Rim, kind of a bounty hunter, Han Solo, smuggler kind of style. Then we have the Age of Rebellion line, also with its own core book, which is based on fighting in the Rebellion itself, being part of the resistance against the Empire in the movie era. And then finally we have Force and Destiny over here on the right, so this is where you're playing as Jedi. Unfortunately, the reprints have been both sort of sparse in number, infrequent, and they've not been very big. So they reprinted the core books, and now they're pretty much out of stock everywhere in the UK already. These beginner games, however, have just come back into stock in a lot of places fairly recently, and they're starting to sell out quickly. So I wanted to let you know about them before that happened again. Now, I have actually already bought all of these and the 4th starter set, which was based on The Force Awakens, and is actually a mixture of different character types from Edge of the Empire and Age of Rebellion, just to kind of show off how these games can work together. They haven't reprinted that one yet. But what I did was I bought these again with the new Edge Studio print, as you can see, just so that I could be sure that I was basing my recommendations on the latest print run and not giving you bad advice based on the previous print run. So what we're going to do is one by one, we'll go through each of these and see what's inside, if it's any different in quality from what we had way back when these first came out. My hope is that they'll be just as great in quality as starting products as they were initially. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be, but you never know. These are brand new, as you can see, so we'll open them up and find out. All right, here we go. So first we'll take a look at the Age of the Empire Beginner Game. So as you can see, it's labeled an Introduction to Role-Playing for 3 to 5 players. 5 players, just to note, does include the GM, because you got 4 pre-gens in here. And we'll flip to the back, so you see what all you get in here. Gather your friends, get ready for adventure in the Star Wars galaxy. So, the Edge of the Empire Beginner Game features a complete learn-as-you-go adventure. Players can jump right in and play as they learn the rules. Pre-generated character folios keep rules right at their fingertips. Custom dice and an exciting narrative gameplay system make every roll a story. And that is true. One of the great things about this game is the narrative dice system. Probably the great thing about this game. So you can see here the rough contents. You get a couple of booklets, an adventure book, and a sort of summary rule book of a abridged version of the rules, because the main core books are about 400 pages a pop. You get a couple of maps, you get character folios, you got some custom dice, and you get some Destiny tokens, you get 35 character tokens, 5 vehicle tokens. Basically, it's a pretty good package. Now, it costs me about £30 here in the UK for a new copy. When you consider that one pack of the custom dice alone, just these 14 dice here, costs you $15.99, it's a really good deal. You get a lot of extra stuff, and then, as well as that, as you'll see once we open it up, there are additional freebies that you can get online to extend the adventure, and even before you move on to the core rulebook and the full rule set. So we'll crack this bad boy open. Now, one complaint I had with the original set of these, which I think is set to continue here, is that the boxes themselves are quite flimsy. They're not, nice boxes with solid construction like you would see from, say, Free League Publishing or anything like that. These are just simple cardboard boxes with a flip top, and inside there's mostly air. So there's a space there in the middle where the dice are, so we'll pop those out first. Now the dice here, as described on the back of the box, are kind of the key feature to this game, and some people don't like them. They don't like games with special dice, but I love these guys. What they do is they allow for a huge range of possible outcomes for every roll. Now, in a single basic set of dice, you don't really have enough for, all the rolls that you would necessarily do in a full-on campaign as things develop, but you do get a little bit of everything. So what you have essentially is these green and yellow dice represent your skills, so these are the things that you would roll. And what's unique about the system here is that you roll your difficulty dice in the same dice pool. We won't worry about these guys for now. This is also an upgraded difficulty die. So let's say I had a skill of, Brawl, which was 2 greens and a yellow, and I wanted to roll against difficulty 3. I would roll these together, and then you get a bunch of symbols. The explosion mark is success, and then you have other results, like this is an advantage, you have disadvantage, well, it's called threat, actually, and you can have mixtures of those results. Like here, we have an advantage and a success as well. Sometimes you'll be able to upgrade your dice, like in this example, we upgraded a green to a yellow, which has a chance of giving you a very special symbol called a triumph, which you can see here, and that gives you, the ability to narratively strongly impact the scene or to have a very powerful result, like maybe you break the enemy's weapon or something like that. On the converse of that, your purple dice are your regular difficulty dice, and they can be upgraded by certain enemies and powers and stuff, or by flipping destiny points, which we'll see in a minute, to red challenge dice, and these have the despair symbol, which you can see there, and that means the opposite of triumph, something really terrible happens. And you can have these all mixed together, so the successes and failures, advantage and threat will cancel each other out, and you'll get some final number of those. But these guys can be mixed together into the mix as well. So you could end up with, 2 successes, but 3 threat and a despair, and then you sort of narrate how that happens in collaboration with the GM and the players. It's a load of fun. And then you have these other dice here, which are your kind of modifier dice, if you like. So blue dice are boosts. So let's say you have the higher ground in a combat, you could add some boost dice, or if you have a couple of advantage, maybe the GM would say, well, can't think of a good narrative result right now, but I'll give you a blue dice on your next check. And these dice have the chance to give you some additional positive results. On the reverse side, we have setback dice. So if you're firing at somebody and there's poor illumination, maybe the GM says, well, you have to roll 2 setbacks, and here we get a couple of bad results. So these have the negative side, and the boost dice have positive sides, but they also have a lot of blanks as well. So they're not as impactful necessarily, but they do change the landscape a bit. And then we have finally the force die here, which you only use when you want to roll force powers. Now that's not really a thing in Edge of the Empire: Age of Rebellion at this stage. You will find some force sensitive related stuff in the books, but Force and Destiny is really where the force die comes into play, and you can see there's white dots and we have black dots, and that will tell you whether you've managed to conjure up light side force with the light side pips or dark side with the dark side pips. You can use either light side or dark side depending on which side you're on, but if you're on the opposite of the spectrum, say you want to use dark side pips and you're on light side, then you need to use strain, and it can affect your morality stat, which can eventually lead you down to the dark side and make you become an NPC, so be careful of that. So that was a really quick introduction to the dice. I know it probably doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but as we look through the character sheets and stuff, you'll start to see the main thing is this game goes way beyond what you are used to in things like D&D or other games where you have binary outcomes. Here you can have such an enormous range of possible outcomes. Occasionally you will get rolls where you roll a bunch of dice and they all even out to nothing. And a nice house rule that we've used for that I've been in a Star Wars campaign now for about 2 years. Love the system. What we call escalation. So basically you do the same roll again, but you escalate one of the skill die and one of the difficulty die, both to the next level up. So a yellow, green becomes a yellow on one end of the dice pool, and a purple becomes a red on the other side. Then you roll again, and you keep doing that until you get a result, and it ups the ante each time. So that's a lot of fun. So enough about the dice. We'll look at the other stuff. So it all comes in a big clump here. And we're supposed to read it from this side. So we've got a nice read this first here, which just explains, the usual stuff. What's a role-playing game? Who are the players? Here's a little example of play. Each example of play is tailored to the individual box set, which is a nice touch. I do like that. So here they're using the characters that you have in the folios, and they're using one of the maps, and they're using the character tokens as well that come in the set. And each of those other 2 sets does the same, customize the example of play to the game, and, talks about a game situation that would occur in that kind of setting. And then on the back, you have your classic crawl like you would get at the beginning of a Star Wars movie, and it sets up the adventure. So you're escaping from Mos Shuta on the desert world of Tatooine, and you're worried about Timo the Hutt, and you're finding a suitable starship called the Crate Fang. You're the renegades ducking into the local cantina to hide from your pursuers. Then we have our adventure book. Note how it says very clearly, read this second, which is very nice. And these, just like is explained on the back, the idea is that you can basically jump right in. So you have your character folios here. You can have players pick the one they like the best. You've got Oskara the Bounty Hunter. You've got Pash the Smuggler. 41 Vex the Droid Colonist. And Logrik the Wookiee Hired Gun, who's always very popular. And then you just jump into the adventure, and as you go through, right away it says Game Master Only, so, you can read this bit, and then it says, if you're a hero player, choose a hero character folio and give this booklet to the GM. Only the GM should read the rest of this book. So this is all for the GM. Explains the contents of the box, how to use this book. Text in these brown blocks is read aloud text, so you just read that to the players to give them a texture for the scene. It explains who the 4 player characters are. Rules text appears in this beige box with brown outline. And then the other sidebars appear in these gray boxes that can include supplementary information or a little bit of asides or character notes, stuff for the GM that will help them make the game more fun. And that's really all you need to know. And then you can dive right in. So it introduces you to the setting for the adventure, which is this Mos Shuta on Tatooine. They explain how to arrange the play area, get things ready, and then you're off and running. So from the very beginning, your players are on the run, and it tells you how to explore the basic mechanic of the skill check. So in this case, you're doing a skill check of difficulty of 1. So it says collect a pool of dice. The dice listed on the character sheet for the skill in question, plus 1 purple difficulty die. Roll the dice. Failure, the triangular symbols. Cancel success, explosion symbols. If there is at least 1 success, the task succeeds. And this is the most bare bones possible dice pool. We don't have any, upgraded dice or anything like that. And then they explain the core mechanic. You roll the dice pool, failures cancel successes. If there's at least 1 success, the task succeeds. When your player performs a check, the active player will roll the good dice that are basically contributed by their own abilities. They can be added to by your talents, which you might have as well, depending on your career choice. And you'll have generally a mix of some green ability dice and with the yellow proficiency dice, which are the ones that have the triumph results on them. And then the purple difficulty dice are added according to the difficulty of the check, which usually range from 1 to 5, but then they can also be upgraded. So you have another kind of 5 levels above that. Here they note the important concept of positive and negative dice. And here they first mentioned the triumph symbol. And we get into advantage or threat. Again, advantage and the threat, they cancel each other out. If there's more threat symbols left than advantage symbols after you cancel out matching ones, then the character will suffer some negative effect. If you have more advantage, then you can have something positive happen. So here they give the example of, they can recover strain, but you can do a lot more than that. As you get further into the game, you'll see stuff about how you can play with these concepts a bit more. So then we get encounter 2, and once again, now we're having our first combat encounter. So we have our stats for Gamorrean thugs. They've got their main 6 attributes here. They've got a dice pool for melee. They roll 2 greens and a yellow. They have a soak of 3, which means they can absorb 3 damage before any of it goes to their wounds. And they have a wound threshold of 6. They can take 6 wounds before they kick it. They've got some equipment. So the cudgel, they need to be at an engaged range to use it. It does a damage of 5. And note here, if the GM is rolling for the Gamorrean and they get 4 advantage, they can spend that 4 advantage to inflict a critical injury. Now the game in its form in the starter sets here has a limited critical injury table. There's a much bigger one in the main game. Here they just have an abbreviated one. So here they explain how to begin combat. You determine your initiative, which here is determined based on whether the player successfully hid, and then you take turns. But what's interesting about the initiative system in this game is that you have PC and NPC slots, and PCs can decide which slot they want to take. So you all roll to get an initiative slot. You order them by number of successes and number of advantage and divide them up. GM will roll for all the NPCs, the PCs all roll for themselves, and then depending on how the battle is going or what strategy you want to use, PCs or NPCs can change up the order. Once everybody is gone, then you start the round over again. And on each turn you get a single action and a single maneuver in any order. They give you some examples of actions like performing an attack, using a skill, or doing a second maneuver that can take the place of your action. And maneuvers include moving to a new location within short range, or moving between range bands. So engage to short, short to medium. It's another range band type game. You can ready or stow a weapon. You can use a stim pack to get health back. You can open or close a door, or otherwise interact with the environment. You can take an aim action to gain one of those blue positive boost die on your next attack, or take cover, which gives a setback die to your opponent if they're firing at you. So there's our first example of boost and setback die. And those are explained further here. So setback dice are added when attacking a target in cover, as they mentioned here, and boost dice will make the attack more likely to hit. You can also perform a second maneuver on your turn as well if you suffer 2 strain. So that's important to remember. Then they explain more about the movement in range bands. So we have engage, short range, medium range, long range, and extreme range. Long and extreme don't occur in this encounter because the bar is too small to include them. But in larger fights and in starship battles and stuff, you will need those longer ranges. And here they talk about how range affects your attack. So if you're attacking at short range, it's easy, 1 difficulty die. Medium range would be average, 2 difficulty dice. The long range would be 3 difficulty dice. If you're engaged with your target, you make 2 difficulty dice if you're using melee brawl or ranged light attack. If the attack is made with a ranged heavy attack, so a heavy range weapon, then you have 3 dice because it's harder to maneuver that weapon when you're engaged with somebody. And again, you can use the aim maneuver to add boost dice to the attacks pool. And then they talk about dealing damage and suffering wounds. So damage with weapons is shown as kind of a flat number. So you take that number, you add the number of successes that you got that were uncancelled in your dice pool. So if I fire a blaster pistol at a Gamorrean thug and I get 3 successes, then I will do the base damage of the blaster pistol, which is 6, and add 3 more damage to it because of the 3 successes. Then you reduce that damage by the target's soak, which would be 3 in this case, so they get damage to their wounds. And once they get down to 0 wounds, because this is the beginner game, they would just be defeated. You're knocked unconscious, basically, and out of the battle. In the full game, you might go into more detail and have NPCs suffer crits and stuff like that if they're major NPCs, and there's lots of interesting things that happen with more important NPCs, but we'll save that for the core rulebooks videos. Then we talk about more about how to spend advantage and threat. So you can spend 1 advantage to recover 1 strain, spend 2 advantage to immediately have a bonus maneuver, but you can still only do 2 per turn maximum, but that means you don't have to spend strain. If you run out of strain, you get knocked unconscious as well. That's kind of like mental damage, and wounds is physical damage. You can spend 2 advantage to give a boost die to the next attack against your target. You can spend advantage to inflict a critical injury on the target if the attack is successful, but the amount of advantage you'll need to spend varies by the weapon. Or you could spend advantage to do something else appropriate to the plot and situation. So you can get narrative with it. You could say, well, I want my shot to hit the target, and he falls onto the control panel, closes the door behind him, so no more reinforcements can get in. Something like that. There's lots of cool stuff you can do with advantage when you get used to the system. And threat is much the same way. So the GM can spend threat, so it's pretty much the same thing as the advantage, but coming from the NPCs instead. And at the end of the encounter, you have a chance to recover strain. So you recover strain equal to your presence score or your ranks in the cool skill, whichever is greater. Easy enough. So encounter 3, we have some opposed checks here. So this is another new mechanic getting introduced. When you make an opposed check, the active character assembles the dice pool, and the difficulty is determined by the rival character's dice pool and relevant skill. So for every green ability die in the rival character's dice pool, a purple difficulty die is added to the dice pool. For every yellow proficiency die in the rival character's dice pool, you add a red challenge die. So then you roll the dice pool and you evaluate it using the normal rules. And if you manage to come out of it with a success or a triumph or what have you, then you'll succeed in the check. Of course, you can also have no successes but get a triumph, in which case something amazing happens in some other way. So there's lots of creative outcomes that you can have from these kind of situations. So you can see they do a really good job of introducing these mechanics gradually and fleshing them out throughout the scenario, which is really good. So here we have a revisiting of boost and setback dice. They give you some examples about when you might give the characters a boost die if they start to understand the NPC they're dealing with and maybe play to their weaknesses. Here, for example, if you offer this guy a chance to make more money, then that's going to be compelling to him, so you get out a boost die. Or the reverse, if you insult the guy, maybe you get a setback die trying to convince him of what you need to do. And there's a little bit of talk about the despair symbol here, which again only appears on the red challenge die. It doesn't cancel triumph like success and advantage. So you can have triumph and despair on the same roll, which makes things interesting coming up with results. But it occurs that something calamitous has happened. So in combat, maybe your weapon jams, or you're out of ammo, or maybe if you're in a shop, you knock something over while you're trying to negotiate, or you break something, you gotta pay for it. Something crappy, basically. And that could happen while you also triumph in a different way. Let me get into more encounters. We have a little bit more complexity here. So we have now a full description of the different difficulty levels, the base difficulty levels. So simple, you have no difficulty dice at all. You usually don't roll these, essentially, unless there's some need to understand the magnitude of your success at this routine task, or if there's some setback dice involved. Easy is 1 dice, average is 2 dice, hard is 3, daunting is 4, formidable is 5 difficulty dice, and then those can be expanded as well. And here we have more info about initiative. So in the first battle encounter, the initiative was determined in a kind of special way to make it easier to focus on just the fighting part. Now we're looking at the initiative rules for real. So basically characters make a cool check if they were expecting a fight, or a vigilance check if they were not expecting a fight. There are no difficulty dice on those. You just count the number of successes. And if there's a tie, then the check with more advantage is ranked higher. And if there is still a tie, then if it's a PC check, then it beats an NPC check automatically. And it doesn't matter who made which check, only if the character's PC or NPC. So like I said, you just basically get a slot, and a PC can act on any given PC slot. You just agree amongst each other who's going to go. And then we have some expanded rules with long and extreme range, and they just explain how to use maneuvers and so forth to deal with those longer ranges, because now we're in a bigger space. We've got some more different skill checks, and now we have the introduction of destiny point pools and experience awards. Basically, at the beginning of a game, typically what you'll do is each hero player will roll the white force die once, and for each white die you roll, you'll add a destiny point, which will be on this sheet of counters here. right there. So you add a white destiny point. If you get a black pip, then you'll add the destiny point, the dark side, up. Basically, when you use the destiny points, you can use those to upgrade skill checks, essentially. And whether it's a dark side or a light side force pip, change which side of the pool is upgraded. So if you as a player say, I want to spend a destiny point on my skill check, then you can upgrade one of your green dice to a yellow dice and give you a better chance of success. But the other players may do the same. You know, the GM might decide, well, I'm going to spend one destiny to upgrade one of the difficulty dice to a challenge dice. Each time you spend a destiny point, you flip it to the other side. So if I spend my light side point, it flips to a dark side, which means the GM can now use it next time. One thing that players will do in the beginning is they'll be a little bit afraid to spend destiny points, but it's a really key part of the game. It really adds to the cinematic feel, and just use them, because the GM will use them against you eventually, and they'll come back your way. So that push and pull of the destiny pool is a great part of the fun of this game. Then we have an encounter with some stormtroopers. So then we introduce the concept of minion groups. This is really handy. So when you're dealing with a large number of relatively weak enemies, you kind of merge them together into one group. They act together and behave in most respects like a single character, and the wound threshold will be kind of the sum of the wound threshold of each member of the group. And they give you an example of a single stormtrooper here, but you can merge them together into minions to make things a little bit easier to track. Dice pool mechanic revisited. So if you want to determine your dice pool manually rather than on the folios where they're kind of laid out for you already, each skill has a governing stat out of your 6 main statistics. You'll look at the linked stat and the skill ranks that you have, and the biggest of those two numbers will be the number of green dice that you have, and the smaller of those numbers will be the number of green dice that become yellow. And that's basically it. It's really easy, but in the character folios they do it for you, so you don't really have to do that. But it's useful to know that if you use XP, for example, to upgrade your character, and you do follow-on adventures and so on. Now we have another encounter here, which doesn't look like it introduces any more new mechanics. Then we have... Yep, we talk a little bit about starships. So starships have silhouette, which is the size of the vessel, from 1, which means the size of a person, to 10, which is the Death Star. So quite a range there. They have a speed stat, which is, you know, the faster you are, they can cover more ground and have an edge if they're in a dogfight. They have handling. So that means if they have good handling, it's a positive number. Then they add boost dice to any pilot check that you make to steer the vehicle. If it's a negative number, then you add setback dice instead, equal to that number. Defense would be the number of setback dice that are added to attacks against the ship, thanks to its shields. They have armor, which works like soak for characters. They have hull trauma threshold, which is like wounds for characters, and system strain, which is much like strain for characters. And one thing that's important to remember, I think people get a little bit confused with starship combat in this game, but it is a heck of a lot like character combat. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the different stats. I mean, the differences are mainly in things like handling and stuff like that, and the specific actions you can take, and things like, you know, if you're on a starship with multiple weapons, each weapon can only fire once per turn, but you can have multiple character actions happening aboard the ship. They explain the different crew stations. So, you know, a gunner can attack with a starship weapon, can take an aim maneuver, engineers can do damage control, they can install HMRI, which is basically, you need to get the hyperdrive installed in this freighter to take off. The pilot can try to gain the advantage, which means outmaneuver the opponent, try and kind of get behind them and get advantage in your positioning. Evasive maneuvers is actually something different. So this is where you send your ship on an erratic course. It makes it hard to predict where you're going to go. Basically, the difficulty of the attacks against you are upgraded once. If they've already all been upgraded, you add another purple die instead. So again, another reason to get lots of dice for this game. You can also do stay on target. Basically, this is the opposite of evasive maneuvers. So this is a pilot who tries to keep the vehicle steady and follow a predictable course. And here this lets you upgrade your attack rolls instead of forcing your opponent to upgrade their difficulty. These are kind of the mirror image of each other. Then we have the discussion of the TIE fighter pilots, what they can do, and that's pretty much the end of the adventure. A little bit of a brush with starship combat. Then they explain some cool other adventures you could have in Mos Shuta, other places you might visit, wrapping up and awarding experience points. So for the example they give here is, you know, typically you get 10 XP per character for a session of 2 or 3 major encounters and a handful of minor ones. An additional 5 XP bonus may be granted for reaching key milestones or completing story arcs. Then they give you some adventure seeds to proceed on from there. Talk generally about GM tips and advice, which is really helpful. You know, don't let a story stop for a failed check. You know, always try and make something interesting come out of it. You know, delegate. The GM has a lot to do, and with this narrative dice system, don't make yourself the only one responsible for making interesting things happen with the dice results. You know, hand that over to the player. Say, what do you want to do with this advantage? What do you want to do with this triumph or despair? Get ideas from them as well. Make them active participants in the narrative, and that's important as well. They mention, you know, treat the the players like allies. You all want to have a fun story. This is a narrative, cinematic, exciting game. Pulpy science fantasy is what Star Wars is all about. You know, you don't want to make it an oppositional type of game situation. And finally, we have a little summary on the back of the key things you need to know. So the different types of dice, just what they're called and what they look like, and what the different symbols mean: success, triumph, advantage, failure, despair, and threat. The difficulty table again, and the very basic critical injury table. So first critical injury, you know, how difficult it is to heal, and you only get 2 strain. Second critical injury, you get a setback die to your next action. Third critical injury, you get a setback die to all actions until you heal the injury. Fourth critical injury, you're incapacitated. So, as I said, the real critical effects table in the full game is way deeper than that. So, that's the basics of the game, which means I don't have to talk about it for the other ones, except for the bits that are different, which are not that significant, except when we get to Force and Destiny. And we'll take a quick look at the characters. So Oscara the Bounty Hunter here, we have her character folio. You can see that they've really got it nicely laid out here so that a new player can very easily understand what's going on. You've got character name, she's a Twi'lek, and a bounty hunter is her career. These are her base characteristics. Everything is explained and numbered, so you can look at the reference on the side here to tell what you need to do. They remind you of the symbols in the dice on the side. They give you the dice pool for all of your possible skills and the ranks that you have in each one. They give you your weapons and explain in full how they work. So Blaster Carbine uses the Ranger Heavy skill. It's got a medium range, does 9 damage. This is your dice pool you'd use for it. You deal 9 damage plus 1 per success rolled. Inflict a crit for 3 advantage. Your fists, you know, you roll 2 greens, 2 damage plus 1 per success, and crit on 5 advantage. And you have some other gear like stim packs, comm links, and etc. You got your soak, your wounds, your strain, and how many crits you've suffered. And that's the basic version of the character sheet. Again, in the full game, there's a bit more to it, and there's a lot more crits you can suffer, and loads more talents and things that you can have, but this is where you start off. Now, when you want to continue your adventure, you will be able to advance your character, and they give you an upgrade menu of some basic things that you might want to do. So because she's a bounty hunter, you might want to upgrade mechanics, or you might want to upgrade your gunnery for use aboard the starship. You might want to give yourself the quick draw talent, which means that you can draw or holster a weapon without spending a maneuver, which is pretty cool. Or the point blank talent, so that means hit a target at short range or closer with your blaster or rifle or a grenade. You deal +1 damage, also very cool. Then, as we go past that, we have a blanked out version of the sheet. So if you want to build the character more to your specifications, they give you a little bit of a bounty hunter talent tree here. Now, the talent tree is kind of unique to these games, and that you can see they kind of proceed in an interesting way. So you need to get something from the top of each connected line here before you can move on to the next. And each of them cost a varying amount of XP. So at the top, these only cost 5. The next level will cost 10, then 15. And you have to kind of navigate your way through the tree if you want to get something in particular. In the full game, the trees take up a full page. There's a lot more stuff you can get, but this is a nice intro to the system, and so you could work out, you know, if I wanted to play Oscara and customize a little bit, what maybe I'd distribute my skill ranks differently. It lets you know which skills are your career skills that cost less XP to build up, and then you have these talents that you can pick from as well, and they tell you how to do your skill training and acquiring talents. And then they give you Oscara's backstory on the back as well, which I won't spoil for you. And then we've got Pash the Smuggler. He's a human. We can see he's got, again, the characteristics. All the dice pools are laid out. He's got 2 ranks in pilot, which makes him useful when you need to fly around and smuggle things, which makes sense for his career. Got a blaster pistol, which is a ranged light weapon, lighter than Oscara's heavy blaster carbine. His wounds, soak, and strain, of course, as well. And once again, we've got then an upgrade menu. So you might upgrade Deceit, Skullduggery. Quick Draw, again, would be very useful for a smuggler. Worked for Han in the Cantina. Or the Skilled Jockey. So that gives you the ability to remove a setback die from your dice pool when you make a pilot check, which is really useful. As you gain experience in the game, you know, you'll get more and more talents, and there'll be more stuff to keep track of, modifiers, different roles and stuff. But you'll get used to it because they get added gradually. You'll slowly bank experience, add talents to your character, and soon it'll become second nature to make sure that, you know, you're using the appropriate skills and talents for each action to maximize your dice pool. And yeah, that's Pash the Smuggler. He's got his own backstory as well. Of course, like any game, you could decide you don't like the backstory and go with something different. Nothing preventing you from doing that. Here we have 41 VEX, the droid colonist. So you can see he's highly focused on intellect here, which makes sense as a droid. Seems like a protocol type droid. Got 4 dice in astrogation, and he's good at mechanics and medicine and knowledge, which makes sense. Not so good at combat, but he does still have a light blaster and some stun grenades, and his fists, which are not particularly great. He's got less strain, soak, soak and wounds than the other characters, despite being made out of metal. He's just not built for that kind of stuff. He's a colonist, he's more about intellectual contributions and social contributions. So, and actually, social characters and support characters can be really, really strong in this game. So do not overlook that. For his advancement menu, they lean into that. So you could train your negotiation skill to move up your dice pool in that. You could bump up your ranged light skill, so he's a little bit more useful at range and combat. You could gain grit to increase his strain by 1, which is a little bit low at 11. Or you could gain the surgeon talent, which benefits from your decent medicine skill. And then you can recover 1 additional wound on a successful medicine check when you try to help somebody. That's pretty good. And then once again, we have our blanked out version and a abbreviated version of a colonist talent tree here. And again, it notes the career skills here and here as well. I just noticed that for the first time. And guidance on investing your experience points. You can see the colonist is much more about applying stims, doing research, inspiring rhetoric, surgeon. This is a support character and better at communication. So good to have that in the party as well. Then we got Lowrick the Hired Gun. He's a beefy Chewbacca type of guy. You can see, look, he's got 18 wounds. Not much strain, but 18 wounds. And he's got a 4 in brawn. Once again, we got the usual references here. He is a hired gun, so you'll see that he is more combat focused. We see more yellow dice in his combat skills: brawl, gunnery, melee, and range light. He's got a vibro axe for melee combat, which does 7 damage. Got a decent dice pool for that. And he gets a crit for 3 advantage, and it also has Pierce 2. So that means that 2 of the opponent's soak doesn't matter against the attack. And then he has a blaster pistol and fists as well, along with 2 stim packs and a comlink. So not much in the way of gear, but the vibro axe is pretty devastating if used properly. For his advancement, we're going much more down the intimidating path. So you can train your coerce skill, you can train your melee skill to make it yourself even more hardcore in melee. You can gain the toughen talent, so that increases your wound threshold up to 19, making you even stronger. Or you can gain feral strength, so that means when you hit a target with a melee or brawl weapon, you deal +1 damage. So that would make your vibro axe or your fists even more damaging. Pretty awesome. So that's Lowrick the Wookiee. Once again, we have our blanked out version and a shrunken down version of the hired gun talent tree. You can see his talents sound much more about shooting, strong arming people, knocking them down, doing damage at point blank range, field commander, stuff like that. So he's a very combat focused character. So those are your 4 character folios, and then see, this was something I was interested in. So in the old versions of the game, of course, it would send you to the FFG website to get your free bonus adventure to follow up directly from the adventure in this book. Now they've updated that. So you go to edgestudio.net/Star Wars RPG. They have loads of free downloads there, including additional character folios, and each of these boxes has a bonus adventure that you can download for free and run, picking right up where you left off from the beginner set, which is great. So you get a huge amount of bonus content. And then they also have a little ad on the back here for the core rulebooks. Each of these 3 core rulebooks has a huge amount of additional content. Of course, there is some, crossover. The rules are very similar between the 3 books, but they have different mixes of equipment, different styles of play. I own all of them. And yeah, I'm a junkie for this game, basically. So I think it's worth it. Then we've got the rule book. So this is what you should look at last. I won't go into great detail on this because I've already explained the basics here. But, this is just a nice summary of the basic rules that you need to get through the beginner set. So if you want to be, the GM or a player and you want to know what you're doing before you get to the table, you can understand the dice symbols and results beforehand, how to construct a dice pool, how difficulty works, and difficulty levels, how to build a dice pool, adding dice, upgrading dice, and downgrading dice. Interpreting the pool, so successes versus failures, advantages versus threat, triumph and despair, and other types of checks that we've encountered, like opposed checks, competitive checks, the use of destiny points, preparing the destiny pool, and how to use your destiny points, and then investing experience points, so spending them on career skills or non-career skills, purchasing talents within talents trees, that sort of stuff. And of course, there's lots of examples throughout. And we got the combat chapter, incidentals, so these are activities that don't require maneuver. We have our maneuvers, which are explained in a bit more detail, and with some additional options. Then we have range versus melee attacks as well, and then the major actions that you can take, and then some examples of spending advantage and triumphs in combat, which is really helpful. And so, for example, if you spend 2 triumph when dealing damage to a target, have the attack destroy a piece of equipment the target is using, like blowing up their blaster or destroying their personal shield generator. That's pretty cool. Triumphs are really good and useful. Then we have the continuation of that table here, explanation of soak, range bands, range attack difficulties and how they're modified by distance, and additional difficulties that you get if you're trying to make gunnery checks when you're engaged or ranged or light weapons. Then we have additional combat check modifiers. So if you're doing range attacks at targets that are engaged with somebody else, range attacks while you're engaged, unarmed combat, improvised weapons, environmental effects, which will typically result in boost or setback die. Wounds and wound thresholds, strain and strain thresholds, recovery. You can recover from wounds through natural rest. Basically, you recover 1 wound for each full night of rest. At the end of each full week, you can attempt a resilience check to recover from 1 critical injury. And a triumph result means the character can deal an additional injury. And droids benefit from rest just like other characters do as well. You can also have medical care, back to tanks, and stim packs to get you wounds back as well. Then we talk about skills and skill ranks. There's nice descriptions of all the different skills and examples of how they would be used, which is really helpful, especially for players who are not used to a skill-based system. You know, this is really a skill-based system, not like D&D, which is very much based on levels and classes and all that kind of stuff. Here you can have multiple careers with lots of different effects on your skill, plus you have talents, differentiate you even further. And here we get into talents and talent trees. So the basics of a talent description and some key ones here in the basic set. Gear and equipment. Currency, we use credits, of course, as they do in the films and TV shows. Ammo is typically not tracked, but if you roll a despair, you might say, oh, you've run out of juice for your blaster, you got to slap a new energy cell in there, but it's not something you explicitly track. They go through the basic types of blasters, explosives, brawling weapons, melee weapons, and different qualities that weapons can have, and what they do, like auto fire, breach. Breach is really good because you ignore 10 points of soak for every point of breach, and you'll see that with stuff like lightsabers and stuff. Disorient, so you can daze an opponent, giving them setback die. You can knock people down. Ion blast can knock out shield, sensors, and engines. Linked weapons can fire an additional hit for every advantage on the gunnery check. These are typically starship weapons that are linked. And there's a list of weapons. Again, it's much bigger in the full book, but they explain what the different weapon characteristics are like and what they do. Then we have armor. So armor can increase your defense, which adds setback dice directly to the attacker's pool. That reflects the armor's ability to deflect damage away from you. And then you also add some soak as well. And there's different types of armor that they go through. Just 4 here: heavy clothing, patterned armor, armored clothing, and heavy battle armor, and the prices for those. And then some general gear like restraining bolts, ration packs, space suits, backpacks, all that kind of stuff. We have some explanation of those tools, and then a bit about starships and vehicles. So again, we go through their basic stats, what they all mean, how the weapons work on a starship, and the basics of starship and vehicle combat, which again is, you know, surprisingly similar to character-based combat. But be aware that it is quite dangerous. If you have your whole group of characters in a single starship and that ship gets blown up, well, then you're in deep trouble. So be aware, as the GM, you know, you want to give the players a chance to do something useful and get out of dodge and not just like rip them to shreds with a Star Destroyer or something, because that'll put a quick end to your campaign. They give you some examples of actions you can take in combat, dealing with stellar phenomena or terrain, how critical hits work. Again, it's a much abbreviated critical hit table, how you repair hull trauma, and then how interstellar travel works. Then a little bit about vehicles. So there's some common vehicles described here. So we've got the fire spray. That's the classic starship that you see the bounty hunters fly. Got the Y-wing attack starfighter. We have a speeder bike as well. And then adversaries. So these are the different possible enemies that you could fight. And there are different levels of bad guys. So minions, of course, are the ones that you fight as a group. Then you have rivals. So they're not like player characters exactly, but they do suffer critical injuries normally. But when they exceed their wound threshold, they're just killed outright. And they can't suffer strain. So instead of getting strain, they get wounds. But that doesn't mean they can't use abilities that cause strain. It just means they get wounds instead. Then you have nemesis. So they're just like a player character, and in fact they can be more powerful, and that's often the case because they need to be a threat to an entire party. They'll often possess talents as well as higher characteristics and skills. They'll have good equipment. They suffer strains and wounds normally and don't have any special rules governing their operations like rivals or minions. So that's really valuable to know. And you get a cool variety of enemies here. So you've got a Nemesis Captive Rancor, big guy. You've got a Hutt Crime Lord, who's a Nemesis as well. Got some minions and rivals mixed in there. And that's it. That's your basic beginner guide rule set. On the back, we have a summary of skill descriptions, which would be handy to keep on the table for the players. And again, a summary of the symbols and dice as well. Then we've got our battle map here. So we have, first of all, this lovely map of the Crate Fang Freighter landing bay. So each area is appropriately labeled here. Yeah, it's nice to have, you know, a spaceship where you have a full deck plan. I always enjoy that. You know, you've got a cockpit over on this side here, and there's a laser cannon turret mounted on the top, and you've got the boarding ramp here if you want to get inside the ship. So you kind of know what you're doing when you get to the Crate Fang. Then you've got 3 more smaller maps on the other side. So we have an overall map of Moshuta with some key areas marked out here. Then we have the Cantina map, which is used in the example of play. And then we have the spaceport control area here. So there's a main control room, side entrance, an office, and entranceway to the outside as well. So again, don't want to talk too much about those because you'll learn too much about the adventure itself. And then we have our cool tokens, which I'm not going to open up right now because I will need to store them with my other tokens. You can see the larger size ones are appropriately chosen. So starships are big. We've got the Crate Fang, we've got some TIE fighters, giant Rancor, and a big old hut. We've got the player characters. Yeah, these 4 here are player characters. We've got our Destiny points. We've got some Imperial bad guys. We've got Gamorreans, Minox, various different bad dudes, some droids, stormtroopers and sand troopers. And just on the flip side again, the character tokens remain the same, but you can see that the Destiny points, as I pointed out, will flip over to the dark side for the GM to use. So that's the basics of what these beginner sets look like. So I'll go through the others now significantly faster now that you've got a grasp on the basics here. But that was Edge of the Empire, where you're focused on, being kind of on the outer rim of the galaxy, doing, smuggling, bounty hunting, all the Han Solo-y, Mandalorian-y kind of stuff you might want to do. But then we also have the Age of Rebellion. Rather than being sort of a lone group of ne'er-do-wells on the edge of the galaxy, you're actually part of the Rebel Alliance and trying to put a stop to the awfulness of the Empire. And this is a lot of fun. I think people don't give this game enough credit because they think, oh, well, why play in the movie era because we know what happens. But actually, if you've watched Andor, the television show, you'll know there's a lot of interesting stories to tell in the Rebellion era. So I definitely wouldn't shy away from that. And being part of a Rebel unit that is not linked up with Luke and all the Death Star stuff, but is off in some corner of the galaxy trying to fight off the Empire and carve something out for the Rebel Alliance is a lot of fun. It's challenging. It gives you great motivation to play. So I strongly recommend this game. It also has unique mechanics. So whereas in the Edge of the Empire, when you get to the full game, you have this concept of having an obligation to someone. Maybe you owe a crime lord some money, or somebody put a bounty on your head, or something like that. And that can have effects on your gameplay. In this game, you have duty, which reflects how well you're performing in terms of being successful for the Rebel Alliance. And you also have kind of bases that you need to worry about and, protect and make sure that the Rebel Alliance doesn't get smashed apart by the evils of the Empire. And I love the sort of red box for this as well. Very nice and appropriate. Here we can see, again, the contents are very similar. We've got a adventure book, which is learn as you play. We've got our basic rulebook. We've got some maps. We've got our character folios, another set of dice, some different imagery here to match up with the Age of Rebellion theme. Here you can see Rebel Alliance soldiers taking down stormtroopers and an AT-ST. It's pretty cool. So without any further ado, we'll pop it open. Much like the other one, a lot of empty space in here. We get another set of dice, again worth $15.99, so don't forget that. It's a good deal. And then we have a pile of stuff in the bottom of the box. And again, we can flip it over. Oops, I seem to have lost the read this first sheet. So here we go. So once again, we have our read this first, but you can see the art is different. Basically, they've changed the whole vibe in each beginner set to appropriately match the change in setting, which I really like. So again, we have an example of play, but this example of play uses the character folios that are in this set. So we have a whole different example. We've got a different map. We've got different players being used, which is really great. So each set really feels self-contained. Nothing is being kind of reused. The adventures are different. The player folios are different. The careers are different. The examples of play are different. And then again, we have the pre-mission crawl here. Take over at Whisper Base. So there's a small battle on the verdant world of Onderon. So Rebel Intelligence has discovered a listening post built by Moff Dardano to spy on his rival Admiral Corlin. You're going to try and take the secret listening post and turn it into a forward Rebel base. So good luck with that. It's never going to be straightforward. And then once again, we have our adventure book. So this again is play as you go, or learn as you go, rather. And from the first page forward, GM only, and gives you a contents list. You can check that you have everything. And once again, the setup as far as the layout and arrangement of stuff is exactly the same as Edge of the Empire, but we've got a different map here, different adventure structure. So they want you to read the opening crawl first, And again, we're getting into the basics. So we have an early encounter with just very simple skill checks. We deal with success and failure. Then when advantage and threat starts to come in, then we have our first combat encounter, which again, we have a simple method of determining initiative when you're fighting against these sentries. Examples of possible actions and maneuvers. Boost and setback dice are introduced. Then we have more rules about movement and range, performing an attack, critical injuries, dealing damage and suffering wounds. Then we get more rules about advantage and threat. Now they can be spent during combat, including triumph as well, and recovering strain after the encounter. Then we have a bargaining encounter, so we're getting into opposed checks and social checks, which again can be really powerful in this game. There's an explanation here of the opposed checks, other ways that you can deal with the situation as well. Then boost and setback dice revisited in more detail, so how they work narratively and how they might be added to the check in either direction, boost or setback, depending on how you choose to handle a situation and how the character's preferences and behaviors would be affected by that. And then we get into the challenge dice and the despair symbol as well. Then we have the fourth encounter, where we have some launchpad guards, and now we use the real initiative rules again. We introduce the full difficulty chart. There's some things that you can do here as well to give you some advantage in the encounter. Then we have an interlude where players can gain some experience. You can introduce the concept of the destiny pool, the next steps in the adventure. So you have a firefight, and here we get, again, Stormtrooper minion groups, some more detail on how you determine your dice pools, yet more encounters. So here we've got basically all the rules, basic rules laid out, but then we have a vehicle combat in this case. So they explain vehicle characteristics, which are much the same as starships, and vehicle scale weapons. So it's important to note that basically vehicle scale weapons do severe damage to people, but they're much harder to hit. It's harder to hit a person, but if you do, it's automatic crits. It's a real bad time. Personal weapons don't do any damage to vehicles or starship scale stuff. They're just too weak. And the starship weapons in particular are really hardcore and just leave a smoking crater, basically. So we've got a cool chase, we've got some speeder bikes, and we've got some people chasing each other, and then the basics of starship and vehicle combat, and how you're trying to complete this encounter and take down the enemy. Then after that, there's some other possible encounters at the base that you might run into, depending on what the players want to do, and then wrapping up the adventure, awarding experience points, etc. Further adventures on this planet you could get into, where you could move on to in other parts of the Star Wars galaxy, general GM tips and advice, and then again, we have our reference table on the back side of the adventure book with our dice and their symbols, simple crit table, and skill checks reference. Now we have 4 totally different characters to look at. So these are careers that you'll find in the Age of Rebellion and not in the other games, but they are all cross-compatible, by the way. You can use Edge of the Empire careers, mix them with Age of Rebellion, mix them with Jedi for Force and Destiny. It's all fine, and in fact, that's exactly what we've done in my very long campaign that I've been a part of, and it's been a blast. So don't let that stop you. Each game has its own kind of vibe, but you can mix them together, make your own vibes at in a different time period. There's also sort of line agnostic supplements. Allies and Adversaries is one, for example. You have lots of NPCs that cover all different styles of play and eras of play. There's specific books on playing in the Clone Wars, stuff like that. So you really have the run of the Star Wars galaxy in this game. You can make the game your own as much as you like. So here we have Vendry. He is a Duros species, and his career is a spy. So he's got 3s in cunning, agility, and intellect, and 2s elsewhere. He's quite good at computers, cool coordination. He's got some yellow proficiency dice there. Also medicine, perception, bit of piloting, stealth, of course, survival, makes sense for a spy. He does have a blaster rifle as well, which will do well at long range. He's also got stun grenades. They do stun damage rather than killing them, and that's good for a spy, because then you might want to do some interrogations or stuff like that. He also has electro goggles, which allows him to see objects far away and through darkness, smoke, or other obstructions, which is not always easy to do. It seems we're having a storm outside. For his advancement menu, so there's some different stuff you might want to train him in. He could train in computers, make it easier to hack into or slice into computer systems, as they call it in Star Wars. Train his deception, make him better at fooling people. You gain the Stalker talent, which will give you a boost die to all stealth and coordination checks, very useful. Or the Dodge talent, so if you're attacked, you can choose to suffer 1 strain and force the attacker to upgrade the difficulty of his attack once. So upgrade 1 purple die to a challenge die. You can only do that once per attack. And then, as with the other set, we have a blanked out version where you can use your XP to buy up skills in whatever way you want. It highlights which ones are career skills for the spy, and then you have a reduced version of the spy talent tree. And again, and you have to follow kind of the connected paths to get to the skills that you want. Of course, the full book, the talent trees are much deeper. There are also sub-careers for each main career, and then you have supplements as well, which expand each individual career into a lot more stuff. So there's a huge amount of character options in this game for all 3 lines, so don't worry about that. Plenty of variety. Then we have Zal, who is an ace. So she's all about piloting. She's got 4 in agility and 3 in cunning. So those are her main characteristics. You can see she's got some astrodigation, 1 rank in there. She's got some deception, cool, 2 ranks in piloting, which makes sense. Skullduggery. She's got a rank in gunnery, of course, again useful for a pilot, and range light as well. So she can use her heavy blaster pistol, which does 7 damage, plus each success that you inflict, plus you can inflict a crit for 3 advantage. She's got the typical 4 soak, 12 wounds, 12 strain, fairly reasonable numbers for a human. She's also got frag grenades, which deal wounds rather than stun damage, and she's got AP grenades, so these are armor piercing, so they do a heck of a lot of damage, 16, and they have a pierce of 3 as well. She's got a lock breaker, which can allow her to pick mechanical electronic locks, and a flight suit, which gives her additional soak and conceal for vacuum tolerance. So for her upgrade menu, since you're a pilot, you might want to upgrade your mechanics skills. You can fix things wrong with your starship. You can train your gunnery so that you're better at shooting with your starship. You can gain the skilled jockey talent, so whenever you make a pilot check, you remove a setback die before making the check. Or you can gain grit, which increases your strain threshold from 12 to 13. I'm just giving you a limited menu so that you don't get overwhelmed at the start, and then we have our blanked out version and a bit of the ace talent tree, which gives us some cool piloting related abilities. So some of them require things like spending destiny points, some of them you spend strain. There's lots of variety in the talents in this game, which is another thing that makes it really fun. And of course her backstory. They've got Tendavar the engineer. So he's good with mechanical stuff, as you might expect. His main skill is intellect, but he's also got 3 in willpower and presence. He's got 2 ranks in computer skill. He's got 1 each in knowledge, mechanics, and medicine, as well as vigilance and range light. So it makes sense for a mechanic to have some mechanic skill. A soak of 4, wounds of 12, a little bit higher strain than our ace over there. But he's only got a blaster pistol, stun grenades, and fists. So he's much more about, dealing with gear and stuff in a kind of support role rather than being a heavy damage dealer. And likewise, if you want to upgrade him, the upgrade menu, you might choose to upgrade his mechanics skill. So that means you would get an additional yellow die in your mechanics skill rolls. You could upgrade piloting skill, which again can be useful for an engineer to have a backup pilot. You can use grit to increase your strain by 1, or solid repairs. So whenever you repair hull trauma to a vehicle, such as by using the damage control action, you repair 1 additional hull trauma on that vehicle. That can be very handy. And then once again, we have our blanked out sheet. You still have the same characteristics, but you can build your skills. And we have the abbreviated engineer talent tree, which has cool stuff like speaking binary, which allows you to talk to some droids that other people can't talk to. Skills like researcher, natural scholar, which give you bonuses on knowledge skills. You can have bonuses to your repairs through the other parts of the tree. So each career really does have an individualistic feel. Then we have Kale. He is a soldier. So he's got 3 in brawn, 3 in agility, and 3 in willpower, so fairly even spread. But you can see he's heavily oriented towards combat skills. He's got at least 1 rank in everything and 2 ranks in ranged heavy, because he's got a heavy blaster rifle, which does 10 damage at long range. And he rolls 2 yellows and a green for that, which is pretty cool. He's also got a vibro knife for up close. He's got frag grenades and armor-piercing grenades, plus 5 stim packs and padded armor. 5 soak, 13 wounds, and 13 strain, so he's a toughie. Quite a bit more combat skill, greater soak, more wounds, and more strain. If he wants to upgrade, you can do things like training your medicine skill. So if you want to patch somebody up in the battlefield, that can be helpful. You can train up your melee skill so that it's equivalent to your ranged heavy. You would get then 2 yellows and a green. You get the point blank talent. So when you hit a target at short or engaged range with a weapon that uses range heavy or range light, then you get +1 damage. You can get the toughen talent, which increases your wounds by 2 from 13 to 15. So you'd be even more of a toughie on the field of battle. That's pretty cool. And then, of course, we have our blanked out sheet and an abbreviated soldier talent tree, which has cool stuff on it like sniper shots, better aiming, natural marksman, which lets you get rerolls, deadly accuracy, better use of stim packs, more wounds, knocking people down. Loads of cool stuff for fighting. For the soldier, as you might expect. Then we have our little notice here that after you complete the adventure book, if you want to continue the adventure from where you left off, you can go to edgestudio.net/Star Wars RPG and get the follow-on adventure Operation Shadowpoint, which is totally free. And again, we have an advert for the core rulebooks on the flip side. And we'll just flip through the beginner game rulebook here because we already know the basics now. But just to show you that, you know, they really did put in the effort to make the vibe of each beginner rulebook different for each game. So, you know, we have more Rebel Alliance themed stuff going on here. You know, we've got images from the Battle of Hoth. We've got Luke over here with his lightsaber. We've got stormtroopers with big blaster cannons. You know, all the same basic rules content, but the choice of imagery, the general feel, and the types of things that are covered just have a little bit more of a movie era, Rebellion era vibe. We've got Lando here, another shot of Luke with his fake hand here. Lots of useful and interesting bits of info, of course. We've got our skill descriptions once again. Here we have a fantastic image, ships doing combat here. We've got a Imperial class Star Destroyer. We've got some X-Wing squadrons. We've got some Rebel capital ships coming in as well. Then we have different talents here because we're dealing with a different set of careers than we were in Edge of the Empire, so that's pretty cool. We've got a little bit of different gear, I think, as well. So we've got the arm-piercing grenades, we've got vibro knives, you know, a few things are slightly different, and we have the weapon qualities. I believe those are the same. Then, again, we have armor, just the 4 simple types, the basic extra gear, which I don't believe has any differences from Edge of the Empire, and then a Starship and Vehicle section, again, explains how Starship and Vehicles work, how the actions they can take work, difference in silhouettes, difference in speeds, actions you can take, shortened critical hit table, and the vehicles that are profiled here are different because of the we're using Age of Rebellion here. So we have the basic TIE Starfighter statted out here, Lambda class shuttle, TIE Interceptor, which are a tougher version of the TIE Fighter. Notice they've got excellent handling at +3. And then we have the X-Wing multi-role Starfighter, which does have hyperdrive, which the TIE Fighters do not have, but the Lambda class shuttle does have. So again, we've got a little bit of difference here due to the different setting. The adversary list is also a bit different. We have Imperial Army officers, stormtroopers, bounty hunters, Imperial Moffs, smugglers, Minox, the Dianaga, which was the thing in the trash compactor in the first film, in case you forgot. Each of these beginner sets really does give you the appropriate vibe for the setting that it's based in. And now we'll take a quick look at the map. So, of course, we have one big map like the previous one, but this time it's for Whisper Base. You can see we've got a shuttle over here called the Nilos. There's a launch pad over there. Got the mess hall, barracks, locker rooms, firing ranges, a bunch of speeder bikes over here, main generator, officers' quarters, armories, everything you expect to find in an Imperial base, essentially, including a trash compactor. And on the flip side, we have the overall map of the Onderon jungle. So we've got rough location of where Whisper Base is and a zoomed in view. We've got the comm tower here, which is zoomed in again, and we've got ship wreckage over here. Then we have a zoom in view of the launch pad with the interior of the shuttle, and then we have a zoomed in view of the comm tower map as well. So just to give you some little hints about where you might have things happening. And again, we have a different set of tokens. So we still have the Destiny pool tokens, but we've got more of the bigger tokens this time. We've got a Lambda class shuttle, we've got 2 ATSTs, we've got 4 speeders, then we've got different mix of enemies as well, more types of stormtroopers, more Imperial officers, Minox, the Dianaga, and then we have our main 4 adventurers here as well down at the bottom. So that's Age of Rebellion. So finally, we've got Force and Destiny. I was just going to rip it open, but first I'll let you admire the cover art a little bit. So we can see this guy appears to be force moving a creature out of the way. We've got a lightsaber here. So we've already got some new elements that we didn't see in the other sets. You can see very different mood and theme. We've got a Jedi here with an interesting rebreather of some kind. Lightsaber behind him. Different maps. We've got this black and yellow theme going on rather than red and white for Age of Rebellion. But same basic contents. 55 character tokens plus 8 Destiny tokens, 4 folios, 1 set of dice, blah, blah, blah. You get the drill by now. So we'll crack this bad boy open. I will say, so far I've seen no notable difference at all from the original prints of these, except that they've updated where appropriate to point you to the Edge Studio website for the free downloads. So that's really good. I mean, it's really minimal. I'd hope that maybe they would make the boxes a little bit nicer, but I mean, you can't have everything. And the boxes are still a really good value. One nice thing about them is that because they're mostly air, you can pick your favorite box and cram the contents of all 3 into one box, which is, I find, convenient. That's what I've done with my previous versions. And then, so once again, another set of dice. So, if you buy all three, which I actually do recommend so that your group can try all the different available settings, you get a whole load of dice and plenty for a full table, and you'll be able to upgrade, 5 dice difficulty checks and whatever you need to do, plus a bunch of force dice. So I think what I did in the end, I bought all 4 of the beginner games, including the Force Awakens one that's not reprinted yet, but will be soon. So be on the lookout for that as well. And that plus one more set of dice was enough for, anything the table needed to do, basically. There's also a really good Discord-based dice roller that you can get. If you just look for Star Wars FFG dice roller, you'll be able to find it really easily. And it's really easy to use. And it ties in with a great website called rpgsessions.com, where you can store your character sheets for Star Wars FFG. So here again, we have a different version of the read this first little 4-pager here. So we've got a Twi'lek Jedi here. And the example play, again, is adapted for the characters within Force and Destiny rather than the other settings. And then we have our crawl that you can read aloud to the players. So this is a mountaintop rescue. So humble scholar Hethan Romand has preserved a fragment of the heritage of the Jedi. So now that he's been captured by Malefax, a servant of the dark side, and he sent a signal to several Force-sensitive allies. So now you're drawn together to rescue your mentor. So good luck with that. And that leads us right into the adventure book. Now here we're going to get a little bit more going on because while we will have the typical rules that we've already seen, we are dealing with Force users here. So now we need to get into Force dice at some point. Check out that guy running on the wall. How cool is that? So once again, we start with a simple skill check. Advantage and threat comes in after that. Then we can talk about boost and setback dice. Then we have opposed checks, a little bit about what a holocron is. So that's something that Jedi and Sith need to know about. Basically, it's a repository of knowledge in a crystalline polyhedron. Basically, they were constructed by Jedi or Sith way back in the day, and they contain lots of knowledge related to the Force, generally speaking. And they're highly prized, so if you find one, it's usually a big deal. So here we get boost and setback dice, challenging the despair symbol, and then we have the stats for the Gatekeeper, Echo of a Long-Dead Jedi Master. So this Gatekeeper has no physical form, which means he doesn't have any physical stats. He only got mental stats. It's just a social encounter purely. Then we have another encounter, which brings us into combat. Once again, we have simple initiative determination just to get used to combat checks, using a maneuver, then an action, or 2 maneuvers, or, using strain for additional maneuvers, all that good stuff. And then we have more details on movement and range, performing an attack, dealing damage, suffering wounds, spending advantage and threat, critical injuries, recovering strain. Then we get a first box on using the Force. Here we go. So each of the heroes has one or more Force powers in this beginner set. So basically you choose a power, then you perform a use the Force action and roll a number of white Force dice equal to your Force rating. You will see how many points you get, light or dark. In general, if you're aligned with the light side, such as the hero players, light side results generate 1 Force point per light side result. If you roll at least enough light side results to satisfy the number of Force points needed for the power, then you succeeded. If you don't generate enough Force points, you either have to get a lesser result or fail altogether, but you may draw upon the dark side as well, although doing so will give you strain, and you must also spend a destiny point. But for this particular stage, you don't need to do that because you're not using destiny points yet. Dark side characters use the exact opposite, so if they roll dark side points, they're happy. If they want to use light side points, they have to spend a destiny point and get some strain, and then they can use those points. We have this interlude here where players can spend some experience, then they learn about the destiny pool, you build that up, and carry on. Then we have another encounter. We've got some mercenaries to deal with. We've got expanded rules for extreme range. We've got the full difficulty skill check table, and we've got the expanded initiative rules as well, which once again we know from the previous games. Mechanics for determining your dice pool if you want to do it manually, and dealing with minion groups. Got some very cool Jedi action going on here. That is what we see from the cover. So you're fighting some ice wolves using the minion rules. Then we have the power of the dark side, so that guy looks pretty nasty. We have some more mercenaries to deal with. And then there is a nemesis, Malefax. So he's got ancient Sith swords and all kinds of stuff. He also has a Force rating of 2, so we can roll 2 Force dice. Just to give you an idea, it's not too hard to gain additional Force dice. Different Force career trees will often give you the opportunity to gain a Force die when you reach the end of the tree in one particular direction. My character, who is a Jedi Master in my current campaign, he has 5 Force dice. And actually, another member of our party is not a Jedi Master, but has 6 Force dice. We can do some pretty crazy stuff. My character's primary focus is support force powers, which can be very, very useful. So, for example, my guy uses battle meditation, which I can use to give free successes to everybody in the group or even on a planet-wide scale at the level he's at now. So anyway, so there's some more encounters as per usual after you defeat the nemesis. Some further adventure seeds if you want to do some more stuff around this area. General GM tips and advice. And then Lure of the Lost, which is the additional adventure that follows on from this one. And we've got our standard reference here on the back with skill checks, critical injuries, dice symbols, etc. Then we have 4 totally new careers again. These are all different types of Force users. So here's our scary looking dude with the rebreather mask. He is a sentinel. So you can see he's not focused on brawn, right? He's focused much more on cunning, agility, intelligence, presence. He's got 3. So pretty broad spread for his characteristics. Got 1 rank in athletics, rank in deception, computers, knowledge, negotiation, and 1 rank in lightsaber. Note that lightsaber was not available in the other 2 sets because none of those characters could use them or maybe are even aware that they exist. But now you're dealing with Jedi, so you've got lightsabers. Notice he's got a low soak value though of only 2, only 11 wounds, but he's got 12 strain. He does have a blaster pistol, but the great thing is that he's got a lightsaber. It does 6 damage plus 1 per success. You get a crit for only 2 advantage, and it has breach 1, so it eliminates 10 soak. So basically, anybody you run into, their soak is meaningless. Force rating here is 1, so he rolls 1 force die for his powers, but you're not supposed to use your force powers until the GM instructs you, when we get to that point in the adventure book where force rules are first mentioned. Then he can use the force power of move. So you can spend 1 force point to move an object about the size of a backpack or smaller from within short range of you to within short range of you. The very basic level of that force power. Now, what's interesting is now that we've opened up the Force Powers Pandora's box, we have that option popping up in our advancement menu. So when you have your interlude and your characters have some XP, so your Sentinel here, he might want to buy up his athletics, he might want to buy up his stealth skill to be a little bit more sneaky, you might want to buy the parry talent, so that means that you can suffer 3 strain to reduce the damage dealt by a melee, brawl, or lightsaber attack by 3. You can also upgrade your force power, so you gain a range upgrade, and then you can move your small object to medium range. That is a pretty cool option as well. Then it tells you stop here. I should have noted that. It says that on all the character folios, but yeah, if you want to build up the Sentinel in your own way, you can do that. And here's a abbreviated version of the Sentinel career tree. So you can get some more parry, you can get reflect, which works against range attacks. Parry is melee attacks. And the more ranks you have in parry and reflect, the more damage you can direct away from yourself by taking strain instead. They also have this side tree here for the move power. In the full version of Force and Destiny, you have extensive trees for each force power, and new force powers are introduced in all the supplements for that line as well. So there are quite a lot of different force powers you can use. And some of them are really, really cool, like influence, where you can, these are not the droids you're looking for kind of stuff. The move power is really useful, and you can do damage with it if it's strong enough. You can do all kinds of cool things with force powers, but what you have in the beginner's game is a very, very limited subset of that. So hopefully it gives you enough of a taste that you want to go out and get the full core rulebook, which I do strongly recommend. Then we have Surrenda, the Guardian. So here now we have 3 brawn, so she's got skill ranks in charm, cool, discipline, mechanics, vigilance, brawl, and 2 ranks in lightsaber. So she's much more about getting up into somebody's business and slicing them up. Once again, she's got a lightsaber does 6 damage, but she's got a much better dice pool. And she's got 4 soak due to having heavy clothes, which is much nicer. She's got more wounds as well with 13, so the Guardian is more of a fighting type Jedi. And she has the force power of enhance, so in this case, you can enhance your athletics checks. It gives you the ability to do force jumps. And again, in the full rulebook, you'll have many more options under the enhanced power than that. On your upgrade menu, after your interlude, you can upgrade your cool skill, which will make you better able to get good initiative rolls in combat. You could upgrade your parry talent, again useful when you're going face to face in melee or against a lightsaber. You can get the reflect talent, which helps you reflect damage from range attacks, as I mentioned before. You can upgrade your enhanced power to get more range. So that means you could jump from one range band to another. You don't need to use an action to do it, which is very cool. Then we get on to the blank version of our character sheet and an abbreviated version of the Guardian character tree, which is much more about, getting up, as I say, in people's face and being tough. So you get the toughen talent for more wounds. You can get parry, you can get bodyguard, which allows you to upgrade the difficulty of attacks targeting one of your friends. You can take defense stances, improved parries, and then you have on the side here your very brief set of enhancements for the enhanced power. That's quite cool. Again, it gives you just a little bit of a tiny little taste of what's in the full rulebook. And then we have her story on the back. And we got Kaveri, the Seeker. Again, another different variety of Force user here. So she is much more about agility. Got a 4 in there and a 3 in cunning. And to go along with that, she's got a rank in coordination, skill, perception, stealth, survival, and vigilance. And then 1 rank in ranged heavy. No ranks in lightsaber. And she doesn't actually have a lightsaber. She has a blaster rifle. So she's going to be able to use the Force, but she's not a lightsaber user in particular. So she's got 3 soak, so kind of middling between the other two. 12 wounds and 12 strain, so not too bad. And the blaster rifle does quite a lot of damage and works up to long range. So, you know, got 9 damage plus 1 per success. Force rating of 1, and she has the sense power. That could be really useful, especially when you're kind of cautiously walking through an area and you're trying to determine if there are enemies awaiting you. Then you can spend a force point to sense all living things within short range. And that's really handy because then you'll know what's coming and you won't be forced to roll your vigilance for an unexpected encounter. So then for her advancement, you can upgrade athletics to make her more slippery. You can upgrade the ranged heavy skill so that she's got an even better dice pool for her blaster rifle with 2 yellows and 2 greens. You can get the dodge talent. So basically, before dice are rolled, you can suffer 1 strain and make the attacker upgrade the difficulty of their attack. So they turn a purple into a red, increasing the chance of bad outcomes and or despairs for them. Or you can gain the grit talent, which gives you a higher strain threshold as well. Interestingly, they don't give you the option for a sense power increase in the upgrade menu here. But that is a really, really good power in the full game, so don't be fooled. And once again, we have the blanked out version of the character sheet, and we have a abbreviated Seeker career tree, like really abbreviated. And here we do have some sense upgrade. So a control upgrade gives you the ability to commit force die. So that means, you know, you keep your force die, you roll it, and then you keep it sort of set aside to keep the power running. You can't roll it again unless you turn the power off. And that will mean that you continually upgrade the difficulty of one attack that targets you. You can increase the duration, so you can do twice per round. So you can also do, you can gain another rank in control to upgrade again. So sense is really cool in that because of your ability to sense where things are, where you are relatively, it just helps you make yourself harder to be hit, harder to be spotted, and you can more easily spot enemies and hit them, which is really handy. So that's Kaveri. And then finally we have Dao the Mystic. Got that kind of Darth Maul face going on. So the Mystics, again, not big on the lightsabers, but very big on force powers. He has 3 in brawn, willpower, and presence, with 2s otherwise. Then he's got ranks in charm, coercion, discipline, knowledge, perception, survival, and vigilance, and then no combat skills upgraded, which is interesting. And his only weapon is a walking stick, which does 5 damage at a gauge range with 3 greens from the dice pool. But he's got a soak of 4 with heavy clothes, and he has an ancient scroll that gives him a boost die on knowledge checks. He's got a bunch of stim packs as well, so he's in more of a support role. He's got 2 force powers. So he's got sense and move, which is great. He can sense the emotional state of somebody who's close by, or he can sense all living things within short range. And then he's got the ability to move small objects within his range band, as we saw with one of the previous characters. Now, if you want to upgrade him, they give you a few options. You can upgrade his charm, so he's even better in social situations. You can upgrade his melee skill to give him a yellow die with his walking stick. Give him grit to give him an additional strain. He's got quite high strain in wounds, by the way, as well as a high soak. Or you can get a force power upgrade to move to increase the strength. So this keeps the range the same, but allows him to lift objects the size of a person instead of just the size of a backpack. So that's one of the things that happens with force upgrades with your powers in the full game, is that you will have different dimensions that you can upgrade, like range, magnitude, that kind of thing. As you spend XP, you'll be able to extend the reach of your power, you know, how much you can affect with it, that sort of thing. And eventually you'll get kind of a mastery skill when you get through the whole tree that makes you do pretty amazing stuff. But here they just give you, like I said, just a tiny little taste. Tiny little taste. So once again, we have a blanked out version and a little bit of the Mystic tree. It's actually a very cool tree in my opinion. It's great for sensing emotions and using the sense power in general. Now they've cut out almost everything from the Mystic tree, so they could fit in 2 upgrade tracks for both Sense and Move, since it's the only guy with 2 Force powers. Again, you can increase control, range, and control again for Sense. You can increase move strength, you can increase the range, so that you can move things to medium, and you can increase control, which means that basically you can do damage and throw things at other people, which is pretty cool. So that gives you a sense of, you know, a little bit more of the flexibility that Force powers will have if you go into the full game, which is nice. And we have his story on the back here. The rulebook, again, we'll just flip through because it's going to be pretty much the same until we get to the Force powers, which is on page 37. But once again, we'll see the theming of everything has been changed appropriately to fit the Jedi action bonanza that we have going on here. The basic rules are all the same, but we've got, you know, Jedi, including Dark Jedi like Darth Vader. We've got a bunch of lightsaber wielders going nuts in the combat section here. We've got Luke and Vader dueling, you know, spending advantage and triumph, that kind of stuff. Soak, range bands. We've got a flying lizard Jedi. Wounds, strains, and injuries. We've got Vader killing a bunch of rebels. We've got healing. By the way, there's a healing Force power as well. Very handy. Descriptions of useful skills. Lightsaber is the new one here that you need to worry about because they are so difficult to handle and truly, truly dangerous. They require a separate skill to use. They don't appear in the other games, basically. So, yeah, then we have info about piloting, different range skills. We've got our talents as well with their descriptions. So, Force rating, of course, is new in this one. Some new talents like one with the universe. Plus, we've got the Force power upgrades available, which we didn't have before. We've got new stuff like parry, improved parry, reflect, and improved reflect, which we can use with lightsabers. And then we've got some new equipment as well. So, ancient swords, Force pikes, truncheons, vibro knives, and we've got lightsabers. And then we got some weapon qualities. We've got one of the Imperial Elite Guard there. Pretty cool image. Now we have the typical info on armor, then our typical info on basic gear here. And then we have the Force, so this is the new bit. So all player characters here start with a Force rating of 1, and several have the chance to attain Force rating 2 as the characters grow. Then they explain the Force dice, so you roll, again, the number of Force dice equal to your Force rating, use the results to generate Force points. You can also commit a number of Force dice to a power, and you count your Force rating as 1 lower than normal for each die you commit. So if you commit all your dice, your Force rating is 0. So you're committed to that power, but it gives you an ongoing effect, basically. And for support powers, that could be super useful, particularly stuff like battle meditation, you know, some of the Sense powers that upgrade difficulties or protect other people, all that kind of stuff. You can also do combined Force power checks, so this is where you are combining a skill check with Force usage. So, for example, enhance. I mean, if you're doing a Force jump, then you will use the enhance power to generate additional leaping strength. So you'll do an athletics check, and you'll add your Force dice to it, and those Force dice count as additional successes, basically, allowing you to enhance your jump and move even further. Then we have the Force powers, basic summary here. So we have enhance. We have heal, as I mentioned. So you spend Force point to remove a number of wounds equal to your intellect from an engaged living creature. And then you have control, range, and strength upgrades. We have enhance, which is Force jumps and other athletic feats that are enhanced by the Force. We've got the power of move, which is moving and chucking things around. You've got Sense, which allows you to sense living Force around you. And then the upgrades can allow you to upgrade the difficulty of people attacking you. They note here how potent Sense can be. And it can put GM in a difficult position because characters might find out that, you know, there's a bunch of surprise enemies around the corner. Or, you know, they can find out where a hideout is. Or they can learn that somebody's planning to double cross them and spoil a bit of the plot. But they give some advice on how to deal with that, basically. And then we got some adversaries. So again, slightly different list of adversaries here. We've got probe droids, grizzled traders, a stalking Acklay, which is the giant six-legged predators we've seen in the prequel movies. We've got some dark side Force users, including a fallen apprentice at rival level and a fallen master at nemesis level. He has a modified lightsaber, which does 8 damage and skill critical 2. And that's it. On the back, you have your same references on the back of your other rule books from the other sets. Now, finally, we've got our new map here. So this is for a temple that you may encounter during the course of the adventure. You can see, once again, all the key areas are labeled, which helps out when you're trying to work out distances and zones in combat. Got a big outdoor plaza area. You've got a holocron chamber, archives, assembly halls, and so forth that you can find. And there's side entrances as well, different little areas to explore, which is cool. And on the flip side, we have, oops, I'll flip it the right way up here. We have an overview of the valley that you're traveling through. See, it says the valley up here. So you've got a bridge, there's a hunter's camp, there's some ruins to travel through, a wolf den, another bridge, and a village, and upward to the mountain where you'll find the temple. There's a zoomed in map here for the ruin, as well as the area around the bridge where there is a bit of a cave system to explore as well. So yeah, that is the Force and Destiny map. And then we have another fantastic set of tokens here. Note, there's no starships in this one, because I think they figured that adding Force into everything was complicated enough. They didn't want to add vehicle combat in as well. But of course, you have that in the full rulebook. Well, it got only one giant enemy, the 3-meter tall Acklay, which is pretty scary. You've got your hologram Force guy, the gatekeeper, you got your dark side Force users, and you have your player characters along here. Then you've got a bunch of different adversaries that you may find along the way. Some probe droids, some wolves, some bounty hunters, and mercenaries, and of course your destiny points, which flip over to dark side destiny points on the other side. So yeah, there you go. That is the third and final beginner set for Star Wars, which have currently been reprinted. As I said, I really just wanted to make sure that before I reviewed these, because I do love this game system, that I was reviewing the latest printings for you. So overall, I would say that these beginner games are really, really great value for money. So as I mentioned, buying a set of dice will set you back 16 quid. Buying one of these sets, depending on where you go, I think I got mine for 27 quid at one place, and then I had to buy Force and Destiny at another place for $29.99. You double the price, so you get way more content. You get a full adventure, you get, you know, some quick start rules, you get loads of cool tokens, you got links where you can get full new adventures and additional character folios, plus you get sets of dice as well. So at this point, I now have, I think, 8 sets of Star Wars dice in total, so more than enough to play a big table full of people. But it's a fantastic game system. The narrative dice take a bit of time to get used to, but they're loads of fun. And the more you lean into it, you know, being creative with your advantage, disadvantage, your triumphs and your despairs, the more fun you're going to have. So I highly recommend working together with your GM, you know, taking some of the load off them to be creative with every dice roll and throw in your own input, make cool stuff happen, cinematic, pulpy action stuff. This is a game about action, excitement, about making cool heroes. And as you grow throughout the game, you'll be able to do some amazing cool stuff, whether you're a Force user or not. So it's a load of fun. I really do recommend getting all 3, because if you want to buy into this game system, there are 3 different lines, which are pretty different in their focuses. And I think it's worth checking out everything, basically. And even in the worst case scenario, you've played 3 adventures, maybe you have a favorite and the other two are kind of okay, but regardless, you've got 3 dice sets already, which is enough to get you started. And then you can pick your favorite line and go buy the core book, or if there's more than one, buy several and go nuts. There's really nothing to lose as far as I'm concerned. The printing quality is exactly the same as far as I can tell as they were with the original printing, with the sole change being that they've updated the little sheets with info about the additional adventures. Instead of having a separate sheet in Force and Destiny, they just have the last page of the adventure book, gives you where to go for the free bonus adventure, and you can also have the additional character folios as well. So yeah, I mean, these are great value. They will fully introduce you to the basic idea of the system. And the big thing that you're going to have to get used to is the narrative dice. And they really give you a ton of examples. They build it up slowly, so you know what you're doing. They introduce you to destiny points and all that kind of stuff you need to know. So yeah, very much worth the money. So in any case, I hope you go out there, give these a try. Let me know what you think in the comments. I will come back and review the core rule books and some of the line agnostic expansions and some of what I think are key expansions for particular game lines in the Star Wars FFG/Edge universe, if you like. If you like what you see, then please leave a like and a comment if you feel like it. I also have a Ko-fi.com link if you want to donate. This is an expensive hobby, so I spend a lot of money buying these things just so I can review them. I enjoy doing it, but any little bit helps, basically. So if you feel like donating, be very grateful, but of course I know it's a tough time for everybody out there right now. So anyway, with that being said, I hope you had fun, and I look forward to seeing you down in the comments below and in the next video as well. So until then, take care, and bye-bye.